Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Nice to have you along. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Tim Sackett. Tim is a crazy, busy, amazing guy in the world of HR. Let me just run through a few things that he's involved with. So Tim is the president of HRU Technical Resources, which is a $40 million IT and engineering contract staffing firm and RPO. He's a member of the board of advisors at Pillar, which is an amazing interview intelligence platform. He's a senior faculty member at the Josh Bersin Academy. He's on the board of advisors at Loxo, which is an amazing talent intelligence platform and global leader in the recruitment software field. He's a co-organizer of Michigan Recruiters Conference. He's chief storyteller at the Fistful of Talent HR blog. He's also an amazing point guard, I believe, in the basketball arena. So, Tim, you've got it all covered.
I know. It's one of those things where I was a full-time talent acquisition, HR professional, executive kind of person. And then I got involved with blogging, and that really became like a second full-time career, which led you into writing a book and becoming a board of advisors and all this analyst work, and then getting involved with conferences and events and things of that sort. So, at some point I would love to slow down a bit, but the biggest thing about capacity is you can't scale yourself.
Yeah. But on the blogging thing, that's pretty much how I started out. So when I became an HR consultant, started my own firm and knew nothing about marketing. It was a long time ago. And it was just started blogging stuff. And then I thought, well, why don't I pull some of these into an ebook? And then maybe I could talk about this stuff on a webinar. And then a decade later or something, having an online conference with 1,000 people and stuff like that. So if people wonder, should I blog? Yeah, look what Tim has done with that.
I know. Yeah. I always laugh. I tell people anybody can write on the internet, but somehow when you write on the internet, people then think you know something that others don't. And you're like, the Unabomber wrote on the internet. Anybody can write on the internet.
Yeah. It's an interesting perspective. Before I get into the HR world, in one word, how would you summarize your basketball prowess?
Slow.
Slow but fearsome, I'm sure. All right, let's do the HR stuff. So the reason we're talking is that you're one of the co-founder or co-organizers of the upcoming Disrupt HR London event, which is I've been to Disrupt HR events before. I think they're amazing. Yeah. So who are your co-organizers? And then tell us, how did you get into it, and what have you got planned?
Yeah. So I've been involved with Disrupt for a long time. We actually, I've run them here in the States. I've actually spoke at a number of them all over. Chris Bailey out of the Cayman, he runs the HR practice for PwC out of Cayman Islands, who's a Brit. And then Bill Benham, who is the editor for HR Gazette, are my co-organizers. I think the big question is, why does an American get involved with, Disrupt HR London in the UK? So there's a longer story, but the shorter version of it is RecFest, which is the world's largest recruiting conferences, is the day after. So ours is on July 6th. Their event's on July 7th. I'm actually coming over to be a part of that event. And originally we had thought, wouldn't it be cool to have Disrupt as part of that RecFest event? I got to Jamie and the team over there a little bit late. So they were like, hey, we can't make it work this year. Let's come back to it next year. But I was like, well, gosh, I'm already going to be over there. We might as well just do it. Let's just do it the night before. And so that's kind of how it came about. And then Chris was going to be there as well. And so we got Bill involved, and now we're trying to pull this thing off. And, Chris and I are very much in the mindset of, it only cost a little more to go first class. So we went out and got the Royal Institution, and we went out, and everything is going to be kind of bigger and better. And it's been a couple of years since Disrupt London has taken place because of COVID. So we thought, well, let's start it with a bang and let's go out and bring folks in. My intent is not to have that event be the host of that event going forward. I think Bill at HR Gazette is going to take it over and potentially do some of those kinds of events on the ongoing basis.
Yeah.
But this first event that in terms of coming back, trying to do it now, Disrupt London has been around. This will be the 16th one. So it's already been taken care of for 15 times. The previous team that kind of ran that had just decided like, hey, we've had enough. It's time to give it to somebody else, which happens. That's kind of typical in Disrupt world. I know I had Disrupt Detroit for a number of years, and then there were some new people we brought in, and they just come in with all the energy and passion. I'm like, hey, you guys, go ahead and do it and have fun with it.
Oh,
so I think, handing that baton, I think it works really well for a lot of teams.
Yeah, and you've done a great job, and I know the Brits, they like to use the word posh. So the Royal Institution, you've chosen a nice posh location for it.
Yeah.
And in case I forget to say, this is the Royal Institution, London, Wednesday, July 6th, 2022. Bill Banham, he's a great guy. He knows HR inside out and knows all the players. It's podcast, and the HR Gazette's phenomenal. Terrible taste in football teams or soccer teams, I have to say.
So who do you follow?
Oh, well, I don't want to say because I'm one of the big ones and everyone just goes boo. But unfortunately, his team didn't do so well.
Yeah, so I'm an Aston Villa fan, so I'm like one of those two, right? Like we're just hoping does not get pushed down. So
yeah, survival's the main name. So for people listening to this who don't know Disrupt HR, it's a little bit different in terms of the presentation style. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah. So I always like to tell people it's kind of like mini TED Talks, but with some rules, right? So if TED Talks are like 17, 18 minutes, these are only 5 minutes, which seems really easy. Like, oh, it's only a 5-minute talk. But the rule we added in was you have a PowerPoint deck, which has 20 slides, and they change every 15 seconds, which equals 5 minutes. So you only have 5 minutes. The slides move without you being able to move them, but you design your own slides. So all the slides that are going to move every 15 seconds. And I think people have figured out some ways to kind of do that. When it first started years ago, and Disrupt now is in over 200 cities worldwide. When it first started, you'd have people try to do like almost like a mini hour presentation in 5 minutes with slides, and they would get off.
Yeah.
And there's always, these are usually night events, and there's some cocktails involved. And so you might have somebody has a little bit of too many cocktails, and then the slides moving's too fast, and then the wheels just kind of fall off. And so there's always that element of, oh my gosh, what might happen? And I always think that a 5-minute tight conversation or talk is really difficult to pull off.
Yeah.
Like, unlike an hour. And I do a bunch of like hour presentations, and you can forget things and come back to them and wander around in an hour. In 5 minutes, you do not have the ability to do that. That thing is moving and it goes, and then you're done,
But for the audience members, because I've been in there, I know the guys, for instance, in the Dublin Disrupt HR, and you're sitting there in a normal event, you can see the list of speakers, and we're halfway through it, and halfway through the night, but we've only up to speaker 2 because speaker 1, oh wow, they went on and on and on. And suddenly, it's become hitting 10 o'clock and it's half an hour over, and that there's still 3 more speakers.
Yeah.
I love it because it forces them to structure their thoughts and also to make a really clear, cohesive argument or share some really clear ideas, which you can use, take away, which maybe don't always arise when it's a big droning, long-winded.
Yeah, the idea is to try to kind of challenge traditional kind of HR thinking, and not just in the HR realm, but all the functions within HR. Could be training, could be, employee experience, could be recruiting, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
One big idea, come at it, or one big whatever. And people, and what I think I love the same thing is like, you can listen to 6 or 7, 8 speakers and it's 40 minutes. I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And you almost do the gong show stuff where you're like, look, it's, your 5 minutes is up, like time to, like you're done.
The hook off the stage.
Give them a hand. Yeah. And so they don't have that ability to kind of really, push beyond that. And so, the format is usually, 6, 7, 8 speakers, take a little quick bio break, get a drink, refresh, and then come back and hit another. And so really it's a quick evening. It's 2 hours in and out. It's great for like HR leaders and their teams to come as like a little team event. I see that happen a lot where an HR leader will bring their entire team because it's one of those things for a quick evening, helps generate ideas. Yeah. It's great development, great team building, all that good stuff.
There is time allocated for networking as well, right?
Usually before, like for like registration will open like an hour before and the bar opens. And then afterwards, great HR, people, we always keep the bar open a little bit afterwards. So yeah, there's great networking.
So we've been through so much change. There's been so much happening in the world of work. What kind of topics and speakers will you be having?
Yeah, I mean, definitely wellness and mental health and all of those. I'm sure those will be addressed in a number of speakers. We don't tell people what they have to do, right? So like their topic to us might just be, one of the authors is the head of nutrition for the European golf tour, right? And wow. I actually know him, and we had talked about him writing a book called Too Fat to Work. And the book, he wrote the book, but he didn't use that title. But it was this concept of, really just, again, like physical health and how that impacts our work life and stuff like that. But with the COVID and everything, we know, we're going to see a ton about mental health. We're going to see probably stuff on remote work. We're going to see the recruiting and talent attraction, internal mobility, all of those kind of issues that we see that are the hottest things out there. We're going to hear about.
Yeah. And do you know the speakers yet? Some of the examples of the other types of people involved?
Yeah. So let me, so we have, I know Torrin Ellis is coming with me from the States. He is like one of the top diversity speakers. Like I would actually pay money to see Torrin speak. Like to me, he's the guy or the diversity speaker that's equal opportunity, right? When you go in there, whether you're female, male, non-gender, whether you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, doesn't matter who you are, you tend to go away feeling a little uncomfortable, like there's work to be done. And it's not, because I think, I'm a white guy, right? So the typical DE&I speaker that comes tends to like be looking at me in the audience going, it's your fault, and Torrin isn't that guy. Like he is all of our issue to own, right? And make change. And I like love that about him. And he's just an amazing speaker. Kristen Ferber, she's the head of people director from Channel 4, is coming in. We have Dr. Rochelle Haynes. She's coming in. She's like the good work advocate, gig HR expert. So she'll be talking about that. Dr. Martin Littlewood, again, sports psychologist. He actually works with Aston Villa, my team. Nice. And so we do, again, just like a whole list of like really kind of great HR thought leaders, speakers that'll be there.
That sounds excellent. Yeah.
And I'm going to talk. And I haven't even figured out my talk yet.
Well,
I told people it might be like the 12 fucks we don't give in HR. I don't know. We'll find something fun to do. Right. That's how I usually find some concept to kind of push everybody out of their seats a little. So
nice. Keep it moving. So what about you and your background? Because I went to a whistle stop tour, but can we start with HRU Technical Resources? What is that business all about? And I'd love to hear about some of the other things you're up to.
Yeah. So I actually run the company my mother started over 40 years ago.
Really?
So I tell people all the time, they're like, how did you get in recruiting? Now, like I was born into it. Like I literally had a single mom, sister, and I, she just decided to start her own company, and it was a technical recruitment back in a time when women didn't really start companies, and they definitely didn't start technical companies. But she had this great story of having a friend whose husband was a director of engineering at a Fortune 100 company, who was complaining at a party that he couldn't find talent. And she was like, I can find engineers. And he's like, come talk to me. So literally the next week went and talked to him and started her company. And so she had been doing that. So I grew up listening to my mother, like make these recruiting calls. Like she would literally turn the volume off on the TV and then make calls. And my sister and I would watch TV and then listen to her. And then she would be on the phone, like, and then I'd be addressing envelopes to like send to people, like for different things. And we would like lick the envelopes and stamp them and all that. So, went to college, didn't ever think I would work in the family business, came out. She hired me as a recruiter, and I worked that way for a bit, got my master's in HR because I decided one of the companies I worked with was General Motors, and had a mentor there that was the head of HR that got me to get to my master's degree with the indication that he was going to hire me. I was young enough not to really think about, I'm going to leave my mother's company to go work for our client. in HR. That didn't actually happen, but I did get my master's in HR and then did go to work on the corporate side of HR for a number of years. Didn't think I would come back. And then at some point, my mom was like, hey, I'm going to either retire or sell the company. And so I came back to run the company, and really was probably better for it to go to work on the corporate side of HR and talent. At that same time, right before I came back to work for her, I got involved with the blogging on the HR side. In that, so again, it kind of started these two parallel careers that have really worked well with each other. My mom, before she retired, got a chance to come see me speak at a big conference. And thankfully it was like a sold out, like the room was packed, people sitting on the floor.
Oh, wow.
And she was kind of like, she's like, you don't need to do this stuff. You need to focus on the business. She was old school, like, baby boomer. And I'm like, well, I've already got this one signed up. Let's, come watch me. Afterwards, you have this like line of people waiting to talk to you and give you the business cards, and they're heads of HR, heads of TA, whatever. And she was like, okay, I get it. She's like, I understand. Like, she's like, I've been calling on a lot of these people for years and they would never pick up my phone call. And here they are waiting in line to talk to you.
Asking to speak to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's like, so you can keep doing it, So that's kind of that. And then through all the blogging stuff, I got an opportunity to write a book called The Talent Fix around, the Talent Fix around talent acquisition and kind of a leader's guide to attracting talent and hiring and selecting, doing all that good stuff. It's been really successful. It's funny because I have over 5,000 blog posts written. I have over 3 million words on a blog written. And people kept telling me, you need to write a book. And I'm like, I've written 7 books.
There. Yeah.
And they're like, no, it has to be a book. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Like I'm writing every day. And sure enough, like as soon as that book launched, people came out of the woodwork to like, oh, you need a keynote or conference and you need to do this. And I'm just like, again, it was the same topic of like, hey, you're writing on the internet, so you must know what you're talking about. Oh, I have a book, so I must know something more. And it's a real weird, like psychology fascination I have with that. Like why? Because I have this book that I can hold and show. By the way, no one wants to actually read or write or buy the book. I understand. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like that's just, there's a weird thing in the book industry where every year there's actually more books published than the year before, but there's actually less books purchased. So you have this weird dynamic of more books being written and less books being bought. And there, and so like, the average book that someone writes actually gets purchased less than 500 times. Now, I've been lucky enough to have a successful book that's been purchased way more than that. But the reality is most books written are really will never even sell 100 copies, right? It's just kind of the way the world works. But somehow, because we wrote a book, we're smarter than somebody who hasn't.
Yeah, I was about to say it's not a waste.
Yeah. I totally agree. But then, now the whole podcast thing I think is big too, because you have people that have podcasts that are being listened to by thousands and thousands of people every single episode or every single month. And you're like, I'm thinking, well, hey, that's as valuable as writing a book as well, right? You're interviewing people and you're gathering all this information in a format that people love. And yet somebody would say, well, do you have a book? No, I have a podcast that was listened to by more than 1 million people. What do you think? And you're like, do you have a book?
Unless you're Joe Rogan or something. So if I take you back to your slave labor days where you're licking envelopes, just say your mom said, do you know what? I just want to retire now. So at a very early age, she asked you to step in. You've described a lot of different things, which is centered around thought leadership and speaking and stuff. Knowing what you know now in terms of business development and growing a business quicker or easier, or however you want to phrase it, what would you do?
No, it was early content marketing, right? Before I knew what content marketing was. Yeah. And so I don't know. All I knew was my mother started a company that was profitable every single year that she ran the company. Thankfully, I didn't screw that up. It's been profitable every single year in a history of the company. So, and unlike like startups today, where you might go 8-10 years and never make a dime, right? You're just getting VC money, angel funding, whatever. And I always tell people, like, my mother created an ATM machine. Like she created this company that produces money every single year, which is amazing. And so there's a part of me that says, oh no, I have better, newer ways to make this work. And I'm like, all I have to do is not screw this thing up. Teach people how to recruit, go to companies that need jobs filled, and relationship-based kind of marketing, and it works just fine. If you want to scale, I think is where the kind of the content marketing stuff comes into play, where it's like, hey, how do you really build a brand, and how do you make it bigger? And then you have to have that I guess that ability and willingness to actually become really big, right? I get that asked all the time. Why aren't you bigger than what you are? And I'm like, well, I guess I don't have a desire to be a Manpower or a Kelly or an Allegis or a Robert Half or, these billion-dollar companies. Because I love doing all the writing and the speaking and all this other stuff as well, which clearly takes time away from focusing on the business at hand, which, pays all of my bills for the most part. So yeah, it's interesting. My mom, I always wondered from her too, why she didn't scale the business bigger, because clearly she had the ability to. And when I asked her after she retired, she's like, I felt like I always wanted to be able to keep my arms around it. I wanted to be able to walk into my company and know the name and the relationship of every single person, not just your name, but I want to know who you're married to, who your kids are, what your life background is, what's going on in your life. And so for her, it was a family, right? And she's like, if it got too big, then I would feel like it was, I didn't know. And she actually retired. When she retired, she came back in the office once, like 3 years later, and she only knew a handful of people. And she said it was one of the most uncomfortable things to her, because she didn't know so many of the people. They knew her, but she didn't know them. And so I think it was one of those things where she just like, she started a company. It was profitable. It paid her bills. It got her kids through college, and she could keep her arms around it. And she felt comfortable with that,
Yeah.
There's something to be said by that, right? You don't have to grow
absolutely.
everything.
Yeah. Took me back to my grandfather had a business, and it was fairly similar. He knew everyone there, the stories and all that sort of stuff. But he loved it. And on a tactical sense, from as a marketing nerd, I'm constantly being asked, should we be doing TikTok this and talk there and write this, that? I like the fact that you've said, look, a successful business, let's not screw it up, do what we're good at, and maybe we expand a bit and do more talks or some content, thought leadership, that kind of stuff. And you can add new channels and things like that, as long as it's done in a thoughtful way rather than shiny object syndrome. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest failures I see from companies is, they go, we're going to, post our jobs on Twitter or whatever. And it's just job. Like, no one wants, it's just noise at that point. I think if you want to, whatever you decide to use, if it's going to be Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, just go all in with it and do your thing. You'll find your audience, right? You might not find I think everyone's trying to search for this, they want to go viral, right? I want 1 million clicks or 1 million views. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you can have you probably know the guy. It's the whole concept of having 1,000 fans, right? If you had 1,000 people in your life, right, that would give you $10 a month or whatever, you would be a wealthy person that was in having a good time. So it's not about having 1 million or 10 million. It's about starting with 10 and then 100 and then 1,000. Yeah. And how do you get those people, right, that are that way? And I've kind of done that on my blog. When I first started blogging, I didn't have an audience at all, right? You just start with zero.
You do.
And then you all of a sudden what you find is that little by little, the audience starts to grow, and they're actually fans. Like they love every single thing you write. And then as it gets bigger, all of a sudden you have like this weird thing where the haters come and they're reading you every day just to bust on you, right? Just to find something you did wrong so they can hate on you. They hate you that much, right? From whatever you're saying. I always thought that was fascinating to me. But then what happened though, with that, when the haters started to come and make comments, was it changed how I wrote. Like all of a sudden I started thinking more about them, and there was only a few versus the thousands of people that were the fans and that were reading every day and were very positive. And at some point I said, no, I'm just going to write for the people that actually like my stuff. And I don't care if people don't like it, because I'm not writing it for them. And the same thing happened to me speaking. I got asked to speak at the HR Tech conference for the first time. And I've been speaking before that, right? So I've been speaking all over and having really good success with it. And I went there, and my wife and I always grade, like she'll call me afterwards. She's like, okay, how did you do? And I like A being the best and like an F being the worst. And I'm like, gosh, I really feel like it was a C minus D plus. Like, I don't feel like I did good at all. And we started to talk about it. And it was because there were some really high level thought leaders in the HR tech space that were in the audience. And I was trying to impress them, those few people versus I had this audience of thousands of people that they really wanted to hear my stuff, and I wasn't trying to impress them. So again, that was that mindset of changing, going, I'm going to start talking to the people I care about, not the people that don't, those like kind of like those really high level thought leaders in the audience. They weren't even listening to me anyways, right? Like they didn't care what I had to say. Like they already had their own audiences and they had their own things. And yet I'm trying to impress them versus saying, hey, how do I impress everybody else?
I love it. It's different, but same in a way, in the sense that, so with email, right? I have an email list, and most businesses have an email list, a database, and I've got thousands on my list, and I might send out either some content or a promotional thing or that. And often I'll get replies back saying, oh, thank you. This is really helpful, very inspiring, or this is practical, whatever it may be. And then occasionally, every large message like that, I'll get a few unsubscribes. And that, even though it makes no logical sense, it drives me crazy. And then I have to take your advice that you're sharing here and say, all right, that's not who I need in my group, because focus on the bigger picture, all these people who do appreciate and find benefit from it.
Same with you. I used to actually pull up on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis, and take a look at those who unsubscribed, and we're like, why would they unsubscribe? Instead, I flipped it around and I started looking at who clicks. Right.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. Yeah.
And what you find is in that email list and all the data that we get from those engines that we use is you have some super fans. Like I have a couple of people that, like, I might've sent out maybe 100, blog posts this year to date or whatever. And I can pull that list up, and some of those people have clicked on those blogs like 500 times. And I'm like, wow, like what did I like? How many, that person really likes my stuff. They're sharing that stuff. And so I tend to I will from time to time get into that list and randomly send them messages, just thanking them. And they will come back and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you sent this message. Yeah. And I'm your biggest fan. I love your stuff. And I'm like, and I don't go, yeah, I know. Like I see.
I saw that on the 23rd.
I'm just like, thank you so much. Like, I'm glad.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I really love that. So there's two things I want to just say for listeners on a tactical sense, just because we want to occasionally marketing nerd out. But one is the fact that, yes, in these email systems, there is data available. So you can look to see who clicks on not just days of the week or numbers and stuff, but individual people, what they're interested in, and the numbers. But the other thing is, it was just a throwaway line, but you mentioned the fact that you're actually emailing out your articles. Yeah. I don't know if it's every day or how it works, but vast majority of businesses don't do that. It's just, I might stick a link on LinkedIn and hope someone sees it, but that's great that you're doing that and so proactive. Yeah. Well,
the other thing that I realized was, I'll also go through my own, my WordPress, my blog that I use for my blog, and you'll see certain posts that are very popular, right? They either have great SEO or they're just, people like them. And I can go back 3 years. I mean, I can go back since I started, right? But I'll go back sometimes and look at really popular posts, and I'll repost them. Like I just wrote it today.
Yes.
Every single time I repost it, even though it's already been read by a lot of people years ago, it will get more traffic the second, third, fourth time that I actually post it. Every single time I post it will get more traffic.
Sorry, when you say repost, do you mean update some of the content or update the date and then hit read?
Sometimes I don't even update. Sometimes I just literally run it again exactly the way it was. And I don't tell people hey, I already wrote this. You already read it 3 years ago. Sometimes you'll have to update a few things, right? Like maybe some a date or a data or something like that was out of whack.
Name of a president or something, yeah.
Right. But it's a fascinating kind of concept with blog writing too, is that the second time I post it or the third time I post it, the same content will get more traffic. And so again, it kind of highlights this as just because you wrote something and you think you have already shared it and you think your audience has already read it, a lot of times only a fraction actually saw it or read it. Yeah. Again, if I send, I usually write every single day. So my newsletter goes out every single day, and it will go just with the last 3 posts. But so often people, we get hundreds of emails a day. They'll just delete. And then maybe one day they read something. And so as you rerun your content, I tell people all the time, like, you don't have to write new stuff every time. Like, you have great stuff in your library, just to rerun it and use it. The funny thing was I'll have, like, sometimes I'll rerun something like from 5 or 6 years ago, and I'll have like another thought leader come back and they'll go, "Oh, and they've actually said this, like, you're just copying what I wrote last week."
Oh, wow.
And then I'll have to send them the link to when I wrote it 5 years ago.
Yeah, stop copying me. Yeah.
I said, I always tell them, like, look, there's no new ideas out there. We're just all rehashing everything.
Yeah. Well, although I have found entire articles of mine copied and pasted and images, and wow, yeah. I love when that. I kind of get touched
there's
by
always
that
kind of. I always have, like, I have a Google. I'm sure you had the same thing. I've like you can put in search things on Google, right? And so I'll do a bunch of those around my blog and my name, and I'm shocked at sometimes at how stuff gets rerun under somebody else's name. They act like it's theirs, you know.
Yeah, it's nice to be involved, let's say. And sorry, a little tip for people listening again. You're sharing so much gold here, by the way, on the marketing side as well. So for people, if you've got old blog content, it's well worth looking back over, as Tim was suggesting, and seeing which are the most popular, because you can either refresh them, or, for instance, in SEO, if they're ranking from 3 to 5, let's add some more content, a few bits and pieces. You might now see that ranking at number 1, which obviously will vastly increase your traffic. And then the thing that I normally do with clients, which is doing at the moment with the software company, is where we go to those top performing blog posts and say, well, what can we stick in here to capture an email address so that we can nurture people? So let's stick in a template or a guide or whatever it may be. Let's not waste that traffic. So much good stuff. I really want to ask something else now, and that is around your role. You've got a couple of roles, board as an advisor, so board of advisors at Loxo and Pillar as well. What does that involve? What is an advisor to a tech company?
Yeah, so it's always for me, usually startups, and they tend to have like probably 3 or 4 different main issues. One could be flat out, hey, like, we just need help with product. Like, is this actually something somebody's going to use, and what can we develop, that somebody would use on a consistent basis, whether that's recruiting, HR, tech, whatever it might be, whatever they're trying to build. I tend to focus in talent acquisition, recruiting tech, because that's just a passion of mine. Plus, a lot of times I can actually test their tech out in my world, right? In terms of like a little lab environment to say, hey, is this vaporware? Is this real? Does this actually work? And so they'll want product kind of help. A lot of times what I find too is they need sales and marketing. Like, you have a lot of technologists that make great stuff, but they don't know how to market and sell it. And so they'll need help with that. And then the whole kind of thought leadership piece of just kind of getting the word out, branding side of that helps, a lot. I tend to actually do a lot of founder, like CEO coaching, and not like in a traditional coaching, because I hate like the whole like life coaching, business coaching kind of world. Like, I'd say I hate it. Like, I don't need it for myself. And so I don't understand it. I know people out there that are great coaches and people that need coaches, and they do it really well. I'm just not that person. So my LinkedIn profile says not a life coach. Because I'm not a life coach. But in saying that, I tend to do a lot of life coaching with the founders. And part of it is,
in what way?
Part of it's like, I think sharing knowledge around the industry. A lot of them don't come in with the industry knowledge, and so they don't necessarily. They're building something that they believe that the market wants, and maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they haven't done a real in-depth kind of analysis of what else is out there that people are using instead of your product, or what could they be using, or why aren't they using, or why isn't somebody been asking for this? Or there's just so much industry background. Or it could be like, hey, you're developing something that this other bigger tech could really use. And maybe it's just creating that relationship that potentially, they would just come and acquire them or buy them, stuff like that. So I've had a handful of exits like that as being on a board, as well. And I tend to only try to do, 3 or 4 at a time. And I always ask 2 questions. I always tell them there's 2 questions I need to answer for myself. One, whoever your target buyer is. So let's say it's the head of HR, let's say it's a recruiter, whoever that your target buyer is or user, would I actually buy that product? Would I use that product in my own shop if I was your target user? So I have to look at it and say, oh gosh, this is something that I think I could actually use. And then the other side was, if I was working for you as a salesperson, could I sit in front of your buyer and actually sell this to them? Am I passionate enough? Do I like your product enough that I could sell it to somebody else? If I can answer yes to those two, then I'm willing to come on to your board. And I will demo 100 to 150 different products a year. And quite often I get asked, I mean, probably 10%, 15% of the time I'll get asked to join their board. And it's rare that I accept because I can't answer yes to both of those.
Yeah, they're great questions. Great questions, especially the second one, because everyone thinks their own baby is beautiful, right?
Yes.
So that you create some software or platform or something, and this is going to change the world. But the number one alternative or competitor to any software is typically Microsoft Excel for a start, right? So.
Yeah. So
can they already be using?
It's the world's largest HR software.
Yeah. Oh my! I remember running a massive salary review process that we would have killed for some software, but it was all done through Microsoft Excel, and kill me.
Definitely.
But yeah. So they're the two questions. On the product positioning side, you said, is this what the market needs, competitors and stuff? Have you ever changed the positioning of a product after sort of drilling into that, or have they ever done that?
I've had, once I worked with that, they definitely have changed. Like they came in thinking this is what the product is, and this is how they're going to use it. And I'd seen it go, oh my gosh, no, like this is how I would use it. And they're like, wait a minute, what? Like that's actually a need. And then as you go through that process of discovery, you're like, oh my gosh, we have a bigger kind of addressable market over here that we didn't even think about. Because sometimes, like, again, like you get so caught up in making your baby that you think, oh, this is what this is for. Yeah. And you don't realize maybe somebody else could use it for something way differently. By the way, I don't think I'm necessarily great at this. There's a unicorn in our industry, which is a $1 billion company. And the founder actually reached about 7 years ago, maybe, asked me to meet him for a drink at a bar at a conference because he had pitched me an idea. And he sat down for 45 minutes. He pitched me this idea of a company that he was starting. And I was like, nope, that is terrible. Like I would never, that would be that. And he's it's a $1 billion company. So
later on. Oh, right.
And I remind him all the time, like, hey, anytime you want to put me on the board now, I'm open. And he's just like, you had your chance, buddy. You had your chance.
I'm dying to ask. I'll ask you later. That's wonderful. Sorry. I'm almost letting you go, but you also mentioned that come on the board to advise on positioning and thought leadership and things like that. But they sometimes ask you to look at the sales and marketing. What's your typical advice there, or is there a sort of framework that you use? What do you tell them?
Yeah, what you find with technologists is they continue to want to add to their product. Well, the reason someone's not buying this is because we don't have a certain feature or we don't have a certain whatever, and they want to keep adding and adding and adding. And I go, no. Whatever your core product was that you developed, if you can't find a buyer now, it's pretty rare that you're going to add in features that are going to make people want to buy. So stop what you're doing in development, put all of your effort into selling it. Because here's what we know in our industry is there's a lot of really average or below average technology that are doing billions of dollars in revenue every year. And because there was a need and they were able to sell it, even though it wasn't the best. And I said, so you can't make it the best and then sell it. You have to be able to sell what you have, and then you make it better incrementally over time. And what I find is a lot of technologists are great at developing technology and they're terrible at selling, and they're terrible to ask, the ask of selling. Right now in our industry, if you're really great at marketing and sales, there's an unlimited number of jobs open because there's just a really glut of, or not say a glut, there's an absence of really strong salespeople. I'll tell you, like one of the best sales companies or development of salespeople that ever was Career Builder back in the day. Yeah. Not Career Builder today, but Career Builder of 7, 8, 10 years ago. They built a sales machine. And if you find people that went through that and actually were really good and probably worked 4, 5, 6 years more than likely they have great sales skills. And I run into those folks all the time where if I run into a great salesperson, I'll ask them, like, they either probably came out of an agency world, like in recruiting, or they came out of like Career Builder. There's a lot of current Indeed people, like almost their entire team, like it has a core of Career Builder folks that they came from. So it's funny how certain companies just figured out how to create really great salespeople. And I think it's one of the reasons on the job board side, we saw Career Builder last much longer than anybody else, right? Monster died out, and some other ones went by the wayside. And Career Builder like lasted longer because they could just sell better. And so that my thing is always, you have to have and hire great salespeople, and that's going to probably create more of an avenue for success for you than your product will.
Right. So 2 big takeaways for people listening is around the positioning. I mean, you can't just keep on building new features and hope that that'll make the difference. You've got to build something that you think, yes, the market will want, and then you've got to get out there and sell it. I know from I use a simple spreadsheet with particularly with software clients where we analyze all the customer stories, what brought them in the first place, who brought them in, and then what did they end up using the products for. And you'll see themes arising. And so what you build it for may actually be one of various stories, but in fact, we've just got this massive diversity and inclusion issue, or the turnover bid, or whatever the HR issue is that gets you in the door, and it potentially then feeds into something else. But you've got to sort of get that detail down, and then release that sales team to go forth and sell. Tim, you've shared so much wisdom and advice. I've had a great time with this. If people want to learn more about you and about Disrupt HR and around your various business activities, what should they do next?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, come meet me in person, July 6th in London, disrupthr.co. You can search for London, UK, and get tickets and come, and we'd love to meet you there. I tell people all the time, you can put in Tim Sackett and just Google me. I'm like, my SEO is pretty strong. You'll probably find me from that standpoint, timsackett.com. I started early on, just, it's kind of that thing. Like I have a bunch of friends like Lori Rudiman that does punk rock HR. My buddy Chris Dunn does HR Capitalist. Yeah. Everybody came up with these cute little names. And I just stayed with Tim Sackett. So I'm just like, that's my brand across all the channels. So,
but isn't there a Tim Sackett truck driver chaplain or something?
There is. Minneapolis. Like I tell people all the time, like there's another Tim Sackett that might come up, and he's a truck driver chaplain in Minneapolis or Minnesota. And I'm like, I'm sure he's upset that I stole all of his SEO. No one finds him anymore. They just find me. So
I think I have a Ben Gagan journalist for the BBC, so that's okay. But you don't want some sort of evil mass murderer or something as
right? Yeah, change your name altogether.
All right. So if you're listening to this on the go, I'll have the show notes. They will include the links to the Disrupt HR London event, which is on at the Royal Institution Wednesday, 6th of July in the evening. And then, Tim Sackett, so timsackett.com and the various links and details. So Tim, thank you very much. I had a ball. So thank you very much again.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.